All right, everyone. Hello, this is Ray Rivetta, he, him, and I'm on the board of the Outdoor Foundation, OIA's philanthropic arm. Welcome to Thriving People, Building the Next Generation of Outdoorists, Outdoor Industry Professionals. We have millions watching in over 32 countries right now. Actually, not really. That's just a bad Zoom joke. I'm not sure how many people are on, and I hope there's a lot of you because we have a great panel today. So first, let me just address a few housekeeping items, and then I'm going to let the panel all get on and introduce themselves. First, this is being recorded. Second, you can actually access this recording an hour after the session ends on the Outdoor Retailer online in the on-demand library, so you can catch this later. And there'll be a Q&A later, and you can submit questions via the Q&A box. They're private. They come to us, and then we kind of sift through them, and we'll do a Q&A at the end. So again, my name is Ray. I first came, and again, I'm on the board of the Outdoor Foundation. I first came to this work just growing up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in the shadow of Sandia Peak, enjoying the high desert landscape, the immense access to public lands around New Mexico. And I really became more of a part of this professionally when I worked for President Obama's administration in the Department of the Interior with Secretary Ken Salazar. I helped kind of led the opening of the Youth in the Outdoors office in Salazar's administration. And I worked at the White House Council on Environmental Quality, dealing with a lot of these issues as well. So today I'm honored to moderate this panel in a virtual session. I am in Denver, actually. I'm missing seeing all of you in person, but here we go. So let me first ask the panelists to introduce themselves. Andrea, you can go first, and then we'll go through the whole panel.
All right, my name is Andrea Olson, she, her, and so for me, I am an assistant professor at Utah State University. I am in the Outdoor Product Design and Development program. And before coming to academia, I had the privilege of working in the outdoor industry as an apparel designer for the past 12 years. So I got to work for companies like Columbia Sportswear Company, Prana, and a few others. During that time, I really noticed the difference it made on people and a business, like the culture of the company and the leaders and how they had an impact on the teams. And I noticed that there was such a huge impact there. And through my career, I actually had something happen to me that I wanted to share with you this morning. Just a quick story of something that really changed me. And it's also the reason why I'm on this panel today. I was working as a designer, and I was assigned to a product developer. And we had to work together, and I went over to talk to him, and I said, hey, do you have time to talk about some of these styles? And he just turned and looked at me and went, what? And I was like, oh my goodness, this person does not like me. I'm not sure what's going to go on with this. How am I possibly going to get my work done? So I went to my boss and I said, I can't work with this guy. He's just a jerk. That was my, how I perceived it at the time. And I said, I want to work with someone else who's more like me. This other person, she works like me, she talks the same way I do, and this would just be much more comfortable for me if this is how it worked. And my boss said, no, I'm not going to let you do that. I want this to be a place where we have an inclusive environment, where people are working in a positive place, and where we lean into discomfort to be able to work through issues and problems. And so I was like, oh crap, what am I going to do? And she suggested that I look at the personality tests we had taken as a team, so I could gain more insight into, where this product developer was coming from. So I read his assessment, and I found out that, while I was very motivated by social interactions and like connections with people, he was motivated by doing excellent work, like just to the highest standard possible. And so I said, well, that's kind of some common ground. I understand that. So I called him and asked him if he would join me in a meeting, and we talked, and I said, I really need your help this season. I can't do this without you, but I'm a little nervous because when I come and talk to you, it seems like you don't really like me very much. You know, it was hard for me to say that. It was awkward and uncomfortable. But when I said it, he was like, oh, no, no, it's not that at all. That's not it at all. It's that I have so much on my plate. I have so much going on. And every time I get interrupted, I have to go back to square one to make sure that I do this really excellent work that I need to have done. And I said, oh, I get it. I totally understand. I will only bother you between X and Y hours. How about that? Would that help you? And he said that would be great. So we left the meeting feeling like we were like on common ground, more of a team. And then the next day I had to test this out, right? To see if it was actually going to work. And I walk over and I'm like, hey, it's our chosen hour. Do you have time to talk? And he said, hey, how are you? How are you doing? How was your night last night? You know, and I was so touched that, you know, like we agreed to meet in the middle, and he gave so much more and I gave so much more. And the point of this whole story is that we went on to be nominated for awards for the product that we made. My boss was thrilled. She said, this is exactly the type of people that I want working here, that can lean into those uncomfortable places and resolve it and make it better for everybody. So now that I'm in academia, they asked me to create a class for the students, like what would the students need most to thrive in the industry? And so I said, soft skills, you know, the ability to lean in, to find this common ground, to build trust. And so the class I created is so fun. We test out situations. Like if there is a student that has something, an issue come up, say they're nervous about negotiating a raise, then we will do improv and we will act out this scenario. And we've done things with gender discrimination. We've done it with sexual harassment even. And it's just such a fun way to learn. And if my students get anything out of this, it's that they will move into, you know, the industry and be able to impact the culture that's there, to be able to change it by leaning into those uncomfortable things and making the difference there. So that's my 5-minute spiel.
Thank you, thank you. Lots to reflect on, but we'll just keep moving to get through all the panelists. Andres, I think you're next. Introduce yourself.
Wonderful. Hello, everybody who is listening, the millions of viewers that we have. This is Andres Esparza. I am calling from Durango, Colorado. I'm wearing a couple hats here. Educator, previous educator for the past 10 decades, recently with Western Colorado University out of Gunnison, Colorado. But I also work for the Conservation Lands Foundation as a grassroots engagement director. Before I go into my intro, I want to thank everybody on this panel, but also take a quick moment to thank everybody on this call personally. I realize there is so much going on in the world right now that the fact that we're tuning in because we want to learn more and grow as a community means that much more. Between the racial violence, between the pandemic and economic recession right now, the fact that we're willing to do this means a lot. The fact that we're willing to take, as Andrea said, these uncomfortable, tension-filled moments and learn and grow from them, that's how we're going to win in all the right ways. So again, if you're not able to attend, you have to log off, and maybe you have to watch this a week from now, that's okay, because we understand that we're all going through this together. So these are hard times. We can't be in person right by that giant blue bear, but we can connect in this way. And I think this is how we're going to make sure that next year we do this right. So again, I've been an educator for 10 years, everything from teaching kids in Yosemite, backpacking and outdoor education with Yosemite Institute and Nature Bridge, to teaching at the university level, traveling all over the world. And in my current role here at the Conservation Lands Foundation, running what's called our Grassroots Advancement Program, which is our effort to look at what does advocacy look like at a grassroots level, and how can we use committed local grassroots advocates to protect our nation's BLM national conservation lands. I think of Bears Ears as a shining example of what happens when community stands up for conservation. I say that because my role here is myself, along with Andrea and others, we have developed the Outdoor Industry Business Certificate courses, which we'll talk a little bit more about, but fall into that idea of what role does education play in bringing more people into the conservation community? What role does education play in breaking down barriers so that we can have full, fair, and equitable representation in the outdoor industry? I love that Andrea started with a story, because I want to go back to a quick story of mine of kind of how I got here. I, just like Ray, grew up in the Southwest. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, right on the border. And from an early age, I always got outside. I had a dad who would take me camping, biking. I later on learned how to climb. And I quickly realized that there weren't a lot of people who looked like me outside. And that was okay at that age. I was younger and I just wanted to be outside, and I saw the outdoors, and in my case, recreation, as some great equalizer that didn't matter what color you were. There's a colorblind mentality to it because we're just outside experiencing it. And for a long time, that was my mentality, because I was trying to push aside how uncomfortable it actually was. And it wasn't until I became an educator and I realized the impact that we have through education, that we each bring with us something really special to the places that we go. A lot of us on this panel have traveled in the outdoors, have taught in classrooms or in nature's classroom, and we all have an ability to impact within our sphere of influence. And I realized that part of what I could do is working with communities, working with kids, and later on with organizations, starting to really think about, what does it mean to begin to build an equitable and inclusive outdoor community? Whether it's, working for Osprey and Cortez sewing backpacks, or working in Ventura with Patagonia, or doing outdoor ed in Yosemite, or in this case, with my current job, being a representative and an advocate for your public lands in whatever community you live in. I think we all on this panel realize that things have looked the same for a long time. And I don't want to look down on the heroes of the 70s and 80s of the classic Sierra Club and big models of protecting land. At the time, that worked. Well, right now, I think we all have this opportunity to, as my boss says often, lift our gaze from what we've been doing to what's possible. And I think part of what we can do here is realize that we as a conservation community, as outdoor advocates, as an outdoor industry, have done wonderful things getting to this point, but we've missed a lot. We've either intentionally or unintentionally oppressed people and their voices and their perspectives on land. Right now, we're at a point where we're realizing that not only are the demographics of the US rapidly shifting, but the more that we include perspectives from local communities, people whose land is ancestral to them and whose land we're talking about protecting, and people who realize in the broader outdoor industry context that in order to succeed as a business, you have to realize what communities are you missing, what markets are you missing, and what possibilities are you not looking at because the gaze has not been lifted yet. So I'm super excited to begin to talk, in this and moving forward, how can we use education as a model to bring more people into our outdoor spaces, into our industry, into advocacy, from the sewing rooms of our gear shops to the board meetings where we sell products or ideas, to the halls of DC, making sure that as an industry, we stand up for the public lands that we need, both for our health, but for the sustainability of our products and our industry. And while we're doing that, everybody's voices are brought along and have equal share. This isn't about giving people a special opportunity. This is about recognizing the talent that has always existed all around us and that we failed to bring into the conversation. So I'm super excited to be with this panel, talking about all of that and all the ways that we are gonna support the next generation of outdoor advocates, gear companies, and the larger industry. So I'll go ahead and pass it off. Thank you all so much for joining today. I'm really excited for this conversation.
I'm doing a lot of nodding along to everyone here. It's odd to not see all the other faces, but this is all great. So let's keep going. Les, you're up next, then Teresa.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Ray. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning for those of you who are out on the West Coast, AKA the best coast, if I may say so myself. It is truly an honor and privilege to be here with such an esteemed panel And just want to echo what Andres had mentioned as well. Thank you all for taking the time to be a part of this session, to learn, and hopefully throughout this conversation, we might not answer all of your questions, but hopefully we'll spark some intrigue that will continue the conversation in how we create a more diverse, a more equitable, and a more fair outdoor space for the community, for our communities. So as was introduced, my name is Les Duncan. I'm the Senior Director of Programs at Outdoor Outreach, a nonprofit based here in San Diego over the past 20 years, and have to appropriately acknowledge our residents here on Kumeyaay Native land as well, kind of in sharing some of the stories of what brings us to this work. I took a very non-traditional path in coming to Outdoor Outreach. Prior to this, I worked in behavioral health and child welfare, diversity, equity, and inclusion, in behavioral health and mental health services, and in supporting youth development organizations. And one of the things that we really looked for in that work was what can we do to build resilience, especially in children that have experienced adversity, that had experienced trauma. For me, growing up, my childhood was definitely a rough childhood, and experienced, various forms of adversity, losing my mom to mental illness, losing my brother to incarceration, and my stepbrother to suicide. And so for me, the outdoors, even though as a child I didn't consider myself as an outdoors person, the outdoors was healing. The outdoors represented healing, it represented joy, it represented inspiration. And I knew that in my career, somehow I wanted to be able to bring that same type of joy and healing and resilience to other youth. And so came in contact with this phenomenal organization, Outdoor Outreach, and saw some of the tremendous work that they were doing. And so I joined the organization last year, and really our purpose is centered around introducing youth to the transformative power of the outdoors, helping youth to build and find their own resilience, as well as helping them to gain confidence in their ability to affect change, not only within their lives, but in the lives of others. Our model is kind of based on the notion that early experiences in the outdoors, by creating access to the outdoors for populations of youth that often haven't experienced it. And you'd be surprised, here in San Diego, we're known as a beach city, how many youth live 10 to 15 minutes away from the beach and have never touched the sand, or live just in the foothills of Mission Trails and has never gone out on a hike. And so we believe that by creating that access, youth have that same opportunity to experience the healing, the well-being, and the resilience effects of the outdoors. And as a result of that, they then have a love, a passion to continue being out there, to continue finding community in the outdoors, to introducing others to the outdoors as well. And then also, most importantly, advocating for outdoor spaces and for access and equity. I often say that to those that work in the conservation movements and environmental protection, that really the resilience of our land will depend on the resilience of those that get to experience and thrive in it. And so we really hold that dear to our hearts at Outdoor Outreach. In terms of some of the work that we do, we partner with over 40 schools, over 40 schools and community-based partners. 20 of those are Title I schools that are on free and reduced lunch here in San Diego, as well as we partner with community-based organizations, nonprofit organizations, and non-traditional organizations like hospitals and healthcare centers, county social services, and county probation, to introduce over 2,000 youth each year, or close to 2,000 youth each year, to those transformative experiences in the outdoors. For the purpose of today, I'll mainly focus in on one of our flagship programs, and that's our leadership program, which is an intensive career development program that really focuses on building skills in outdoor leadership, environmental education, policy advocacy, and personal and professional development for youth. so that youth can not only see themselves in the outdoors, but also have some of their first experiences or some of their first professional experiences working in the outdoors as well. One of the things that we're proud of as an organization is that over 50% of our staff are leadership program graduates, field instructors and program coordinators that are able to create some of the same experiences and opportunities that they've had in the outdoors for kids coming from the same high schools and some of the same neighborhoods that they came from, creating that experience of community and representation in the outdoors. In addition to that, some of our leads have also gone on to advocate for critical policy change, both on a local and state level. For example, Tatiana Butte, who is a 2019 leadership program graduate, and actually one of the finalists for the Outdoor Inspirations Awards, which will be taking place this week. She's been tremendously instrumental in sitting down, meeting with the California Natural Resources Agency Secretary Wade Crowfoot and the California First Partner, as well as several other state and local lawmakers to really push forward the importance of greater outdoor equity and access, especially for underrepresented youth, really elevating her story as a way to be able to bring other youth into the outdoors. Now, these efforts haven't just been kind of token one-off efforts. They've actually brought about very real change. And so in collaboration with our partners at the Parks Now Coalition and the California State Parks Foundation, we've seen the state make significant investments in outdoor equity, such as California Proposition 68, such as the Outdoor Equity Grant, $20 million that was allocated this year by our governor, and that was protected throughout all of the budget cuts as a result of COVID, to the Youth Community Access Grant, which is an allocation of the Prop 64 marijuana funds to funding youth development organizations. Our leads also go off to work elsewhere throughout the outdoor industry, including Knowles. Two of our leads actually, as we speak, are on a 30-day expedition. Shout out to Mung and Realm, who are out there right now, as well as our partnerships with Joshua Tree National Park and Cabrillo National Monument to provide youth with some of their first opportunities, their first career opportunities in national parks. So that's a little bit about some of our programs. I'll dive into it more as we have more conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for everyone sharing their stories. It's really enriching this already. Thank you. Teresa, you're up, and then we will get to some questions to discuss.
Sure. First, I'd like to start by acknowledging the Ohlone land in which I'm on and all of the the stolen Native American land across this country. Secondly, I'll just go there. I'd like to acknowledge the loss of two great civil rights leaders, Representative John Lewis and Reverend C.T. Vivian. It is upon their shoulders that I stand and do this work, along with other ancestors who have given me the willpower to move forward in speaking truth to power. I work on matters of diversity and inclusion in outdoor spaces. I am the founder of the Outdoor CEO Diversity Pledge, and we work on bringing outdoor brands and nonprofits on board to do this difficult work of inclusion in and out of the outdoor industry. So I won't go too much into that right now. I will wait for the conversation to develop, but I want to give a shout out to Angelou, who did an amazing job on the panel earlier today. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the Black men and women who have lost their lives year after year after year through a racist system that we are fighting day in and day out to dismantle. So I will end with that.
Well, Teresa, thanks for mentioning especially those key leaders and reminding us how serious and important this work is. And so maybe that's, I'll just jump right into it. I think with some bit larger questions. And speaking of Angelou, our keynote this morning, talking about, I heard her say something about making white people comfortable was like a way of getting along in the world. It really resonated with me, being a New Mexican and a Korean American. My mother's Korean. So I guess one question to start that is, what comes first? Do we have to lean into the discomfort of making a predominantly kind of white corporate structure uncomfortable? And or do we have to change that structure and have 10, 15 new hires immediately? I mean, how do we lean into that, especially amongst the context of what's happening in the world right now? I just, this idea of where do we start? I think sometimes people say small steps, big steps, where do we go to create these careers and change culture, especially now?
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in and I'll make it quick. And anybody else, panel, please jump in as well. I love that starting question. That's kind of like the chicken and egg dilemma. Do we create an inclusive work environment in our mission statement and in our policies and our handbook and our hiring? Or do we look to make sure that our organizations, both at the leadership, staff, board level, are representative of the communities we serve? And I think if we strive for one or the other right away, we're going to fail. If we bring on 10 people of color and our workplace is not inclusive and does not value perspective, but instead views people of color as metrics and check marks, those people are going to quit. There's going to be a new crop of people of color who come in and they're going to quit because the environment isn't there, and people of color are going to be seen as unreliable, which is not at all the case. It's the system that is unreliable. On the other hand, you could spend decades trying to create the most inclusive work environment, but until you bring in new perspectives that you have previously ignored, you're not going to benefit from it, and your ideas of what an inclusive work environment aren't going to be tested. And I think that goes to maybe the making people uncomfortable with a little tension is, it's one thing to create a equity and inclusion statement. It's another to have people of color, people from oppressed identities in your community who then test your theory and say, it needs a little more work. And being able to listen to that and grow and evolve from that is really kind of where it starts to come together. None of us are going to get it right the first time. In fact, we're all going to fail miserably the first couple times, and that's perfectly okay as long as we're looking at this as how can we be better, because this is something that we're 30 years too late to, so we have a lot of catch up to do. So the long way of saying it's not a chicken or egg, one or the other, it's two lanes moving in the same direction that are getting feedback from each other as we go forward and accepting the tension as a tool for growth.
I could hop
Would
in.
anyone like to add? Yeah, Les, go ahead. I saw unmute. Go ahead.
No, totally. I think, to answer your question also about, whether or not to make people uncomfortable, I think that inherently the truth is uncomfortable, right? So the more we become aware of truth, the more uncomfortable we should be. I think, I just finished reading a phenomenal book by Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. It's not a new book, it's been out for years, and it's haunting to see how many realities within that book are still present today. And the reason I bring that up, while that book is focused on mass incarceration, the system of mass incarceration in our country, there's so many parallels that we see in how she breaks down systemic racism in our country and how it has created a permanent underclass of in particularly Black, Indigenous, and people of color throughout our country. When we think about our outdoor spaces, when we think about our outdoor lands, and think about the relationship of people of color to those outdoor spaces, inherently that was there, right? Those lands were stolen from indigenous people. And the more we read, the more we learn about that, that should make us inherently uncomfortable. But then also the more that we understand as well, the relationship that that Black people have had and that people of color have had historically in the past to the outdoors, we should recognize that the outdoors is not a space for predominantly white, cisgendered, male individuals, that it's really a space that belongs to all of us. So in answering the question of uncomfort, I think that, you know, anyone with eyes open at this point should remain uncomfortable. And so I think a part of our role is both in educating communities as well as working alongside to really develop new systems, right? In order to address systemic racism, it takes more than just a flashy statement or a public picture. It really takes doing the hard work to really dig in and dismantle the systems within our organizations, within our communities, and then on a national level. To really bring about justice and equity in outdoor spaces and in the outdoor industry.
Well, if I could, I'd like to ask Teresa, since you have this pledge and you're getting CEOs to take it, I mean, do you see these two lanes happening? Are they, how are CEOs and companies dealing with this discomfort? I think you're kind of on the front lines here.
I think this is a difficult conversation to have, period. And the reason it's difficult is because it's not necessarily a conversation on DEI. It's a conversation on race. And this country is not at ease in that conversation. So we make up excuses so that we don't have to deal with it directly. So it's not, for me, it's not a matter of making people comfortable with DEI. It's about me speaking truth to power, period. And how you receive that truth isn't on me. That's on you to deal with. So I take the approach of telling it like it is, because as my father used to say to me, speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. So with the understanding of, I live in debt to those who came before me and an obligation to those who will come after. So my job isn't to make people feel comfortable in receiving the truth. It's in putting the truth out there and expecting us as human beings, as adults, to understand our obligation within that truth. So the fact that so many CEOs have come on board and said, yes, I understand this work needs to be done. It's not easy. We will make mistakes. We just need a plan forward. And that's what the pledge gives people. It gives people a path forward, not in absolute, because there's no one or two ways of doing this work. As long as we reach a goal of change, a goal of better, then we're living up to that obligation to the pledge. And I think that's what all the CEOs have done in their commitment to the pledge.
So speaking of the plan then, I mean, and Andrea, going back to like what you're seeing in academia, do you see that there's a pathway, a plan for getting more people into this work, to changing cultures, are you seeing it, and maybe you're building it right now?
I feel like I'm trying to make it right now because it's something that's so systemic, you know, it's like these hierarchical, toxic cultures. And sometimes that even happens within a team. Like I've seen examples of like a more positive company culture, but then within a team, there's been negatives and tension and discrimination. So yeah, it goes back to like my purpose. The thing I really believe in is, you know, if you can lean into the discomfort in that moment, like hearing the truth, hearing someone else's pain and like what that does to you, like how that feels in my body, like if I can sit with that and I can lean into it and feel it for 30 seconds longer, instead of just like being, well, you know, or saying an excuse or trying to avoid it or passing something off or saying, hey, let's go get lunch, you know, then I think that that is where that happens, because as that sitting in that discomfort extends out, you feel into a new sense of what's actually there in front of you and who is in front of you, and the underlying things that make us the same. Like, we feel pain, we feel desire to excel, we want to be a part of something great. We, you know, there's certain human things that make us who we are. And I really believe that getting to that core humanness, which is what everybody wants, right? That's the whole point of what we're doing, in my eyes, is what can allow us to make these shaky steps and these really difficult things and actually get through it instead of having it blow up and get even worse. I mean, I think our humanity is the one thing, our ability to feel pain and compassion is going to be the thing that allows us to build a foundation, to build something new on.
So I'll add another question here to keep this moving, but I also wanted to encourage anyone who's watching this, you can send in some questions. We're going to have some time to answer those, hopefully. So feel free to put up a question. So we talked a little bit now about, you know, maybe the industry and the culture and the discomfort that's happening, maybe, you know, and speaking truth to power in the workplace. What about on the sort of the beginning of the pipeline? And I think earlier, again, I heard a panelist on the morning keynote talk about, you know, person of color saying, I just don't see myself in this work, like maybe in the marketing or just in terms of the way these companies portray themselves. And it's not a pathway that's discussed amongst my culture and my people, and that's real, right? That's, you know, again, I mentioned earlier, growing up with a Korean mother, there was only 2 jobs, and it was doctor or lawyer. And you know, and I worked for the president of the United States, and I still don't think she was impressed. She wanted me to be a lawyer. So nowhere on that was Department of the Interior or Outdoor Advocate or, you know, outdoor outreach. So how do we get more people to talk about this as a legitimate pathway? Yeah, and I know some of you are doing this work. So do you feel like it's happening, that more people can see themselves in this work and tell their parents, hey, I want to go work for North Face?
So kind of keeping in the same order, I think there's a couple of ways to look at it. I think on one end, there's within our own communities is when we're in positions to have a positive influence on people from our background, it's kind of our duty to show that I'm doing this, and if you want to, you could do this as well, to bring more people of color into this space. But I feel like we sometimes fall into the victim mentality of we need to have more representation because we've been underrepresented. And I think a good way to flip that script is for companies, either nonprofits, for-profits, government agencies, to realize how are all the ways that we are losing out and missing and ultimately losing ground in public lands and environmental protection and all the social justice issues by not including people of color and all the communities we've not included. So instead of saying we deserve to be there because we haven't had the opportunity, I'm really interested in flipping that script and turning the question back to all the organizations and saying, think for a second about all the ways that you are losing because you've left us out. And I think when you flip the script like that, we become an important asset to an equitable and important future versus something that needs to be added in to look good in external PR. And I don't know if that's directly related to your question, but I think framing it like that really shows that the larger community together with all our perspectives will win. When people are left out, we spend a lot of energy trying to craft statements to talk gently around issues of race, like Teresa said, when crafting a DEI statement is really about making a lot of people unlearn all the systemic racism, prejudice, and bias that they carry with them. And we need to make sure that people understand that all that baggage that they've brought with them, consciously or subconsciously, is holding them back, not us. And I think being able to flip that script pushes us all forward in a really, really cool way.
Just to piggyback off of what Andres said, and as well as the brilliant case that Angelou made this morning for both kind of the economic or the financial case for diversity in the outdoor industry, as well as the social case for diversity. You know, there's no doubt, right? By 2040, I think most studies show that America will be a predominantly minority majority, meaning that the face of America is changing. How America will act and interact and thrive in the outdoors will be inherently different. And so there's a very strong, very clear kind of financial bottom line case for why industries need to really be looking critically at its diversity, but even more importantly than diversity and kind of, you know, as Andres was saying, just kind of like, you know, quickly scrambling to increase diversity within the organization. I think what you know, companies should really look at is what is the experience that they're creating for their consumers, and B, what the community is, right? Every brand, every company has a community, whether intentionally built or not, right? There's a community of followers, there's a certain consumer profile that you have, and people that are loyal to your brand. If your brand is successful, you have that community. And those people are there because they feel included. They feel like when they're putting on your running shoes, or when they're, you know, putting on your jacket or utilizing your gear, they feel like they belong to a particular community. And so you know, as panelists have shared, if we're not looking at who's outside of that community, then you're already kind of on a downward trajectory. I talk about experience also, and so Ray, you started getting at early experiences in the outdoors, which is, you know, a huge focus of what our organization does. As youth see themselves in outdoor spaces, that's ultimately what's going to bring about, you know, their affinity, their likelihood to continue revisiting those spaces, to continue advocating for those spaces later on. And so brands that, you know, we're proud to say that we've worked closely with, like the North Face, like Patagonia, Prana, Eagle Creek, those organizations recognize that those early experiences, investing in those early experiences, whether or not it brings about, you know, customer loyalty or new consumers, they recognize that they are investing in the future generations to the outdoors, and that they're cultivating a movement that's larger than themselves through those connections. The other thing I wanted to kind of put in to, you know, and you quickly throw out the word pipeline as well. One of the things that the outdoor industry should be looking at critically across the system is, well, what pipelines are you creating into the outdoors? So as we talk about community, there's a profile for who the community is that's internal to your organization and your consumers. In order to change that, you have to look back at, all right, well, what is keeping Black and brown people, or what is keeping the LGBTQ community, or what is keeping individuals with disabilities? What's keeping them out of our network or out of our sphere? And then work backwards to create some of those pipelines that then introduce them, or that then welcome them in. And so that's where I highlight, you know, some of our partnerships with different brands, with different land managers, outdoor land managers that are actively working to build that new base, that new employee base that will ultimately not only diversify their workforce, but they will ultimately be the ones that are bringing the creativity, the ingenuity that will help to transform their workplace and create a new experience, a new community for others to be able to enter and join as well.
I've got a couple questions from the audience. Unless anyone wants to pick that up for a second.
Well, I do want to, just for a second.
Go for it.
Like with the pipeline in, another thing I wanted to just touch on is, you know, the brands themselves have so much to say with the ad campaigns that they produce. And in the past, it's been so much about, you know, the outdoor industry has been represented by a single, lone, super hardcore white male on the top of an unreachable mountain. And that's kind of been, you know, what represents it. And I see ads changing now to include a lot of different type of people, more diversity. And And I think that that's an important thing that Angelou brought up today too, is if you don't see yourself in a role, like say as a designer in the outdoor industry, then you might not even know you could do that. So one thing I think would be really a fun thing to do would be to have the companies pick diverse people from their staff and then have that be kind of an interview posted on a website of, this is the job I hold and this is the route that I went to get into that role. And you can definitely do it too, because I mean, if you're not able to see that you could be in that place, you know, then you're not included. And in our program, when it first started, it's about 5 years old now. At the beginning, in the first year, we had a huge attrition rate of the women that were in the program. Because, and like we talked to them and we're like, what's going on? Why are you feeling this way? And they said, well, we're just not hardcore enough to be designers or developers. And that's so not true. But the thing was, is so many of the people there were dropping cliffs on their skis and, you know, climbing amazing things, which is amazing, but that's not the only way that you can enjoy the outdoors. And you don't have to be hardcore to be a good designer. And so that was a barrier that was tricky to get through. But I think one of the things that happened is our program became kind of a pipeline because it leads to the outdoor industry. Like we even say it does, you know, outdoor product design and development. And traditionally, you would have to go through a fashion design program and then end up at an outdoor company or an industrial design company and then, you know, or school and then end up in one. So we are making more of a straight shot to it, but it attracted a lot of people that just wanted to be in the outdoor industry. But really, you know, to be a good designer, you have to have very specific skills, and just being hardcore in a sport doesn't mean that you have those skills. So it was hard for us in the beginning to get people that are really going to excel at designing and developing products in. And then once we did that, like more women were able to come. I think it's really positive that I can be a teacher there. Like I've been in the industry, I succeeded. I know how hard it is at times, how hierarchical it is, you know, how hardcore that you're supposed to be. And one of the best designers I've ever known just likes walking outside and gardening. So I think we just need to show more views of who these people are and who they can be.
All right, we have just 10, 13 minutes left. I'll try to rattle off a few quick questions. So panelists, maybe think about being abbreviated answers. Just so one from James Mills. Can anyone point to something more specific than just the CEO pledge, but like what are companies actually doing to do, you know, maybe a quick program or a project that we're seeing beyond just signing the pledge? And then also maybe related, does anyone have any idea of how the racial makeup and diversity of any of these, the CEOs or the board of directors?
I can speak to that. I have never wanted the pledge to be, you know, a one-off for anyone. Signing the pledge is simple. The work is what's hard. And let me be clear on this. If you are from a brand or a nonprofit, take a look at your leadership. Take a look at your boards. If you are only seeing white men and white women, you have a problem. It doesn't take me coming in and pointing that out to you. You can see that. So my ask is that you start working on that. And it's no longer fair to put out there that we can't find these people. That's BS. We're out here. We're doing the work day in and day out. There's Audrey and Frank Peterman of who created DALE, Diverse Environmental Leaders. There's a leadership group there that are made up of scientists, developers, amazing people doing this work. Yet I'm still hearing the same old message. We can't find these people. So we have to do away with that and understand that we're here. We see us. Why can't you see us? So you have to make an intentional effort in reaching out to us and finding out where we are. That's the only way we're going to change this industry. This industry has to work on itself. This industry needs to call out itself. It needs to put more effort in understanding what they're not doing and why they aren't doing it, versus saying, oh, well, it's their problem that we can't find them. So we're out here, we're doing the work. Connect with us.
Thank you for that. And I think a lot of people would like to add, but I want to throw in another question just in the sense of time, and it's related, Teresa, to some of Teresa's comments. Sorry, I don't have the name for this one, but so the question was a little bit of a comment too, which I think is great. From my observation, there are folks in the outdoor industry that have sound footing, that are in the industry and have paved the way. However, I've also seen that amongst Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, we become gatekeepers. We have limited access, limited resources, and sharing that comes at a cost for us, a person in the industry. So in the last few years, Black, Indigenous, people of color and communities have become somewhat attacked within the industry for not being able to share or bring people along fast enough. I'm actually adding that part. So a form of trauma is being created even amongst people of color. So how can the industry get past this? Has anyone dealt with this or have a thought here? This is a big one.
I'll start by saying, hi, Maricela, how's it going? Fellow colleague. I see it happening because those of us who, with quotes, have made it in are suffering from this scarcity mentality. Like, I got my piece of the pie, nobody can take my piece now. And that itself is that first level of trauma. Like, oh my God, I made it here, I can't let go of it. And, if we look at the root of what all this is based in, it's in a white supremacy model of what power is and how power is given and not taken, and how when you get it, you cannot let it go. And I think for better or worse, a lot of us have fallen into that mentality of, I got in, it was so hard, I don't want to let somebody else in because I might lose my job. And it's real, and I think we all fall victim to that. And I think part of it is perpetuated in how our organizations are run and how we view power. So I don't have an answer, but I think a lot of the answer lies in what are the power structures in our organizations and how do they perpetuate the ideas of power being a finite thing that must be controlled versus power being something that is generated when all of us come together. And if we keep operating under a scarcity mindset and limited power, as soon as we get into it and get that little taste of it, we're going to fall victim to it because it's going to be our human nature, unfortunately.
Just to piggyback, I have to piggyback off of that, Andres, because I think you really hit the nail on the head. I would also flip it as well on corporations, on the industry as a whole as well. So there's this concept of tokenism that I'm very wary of when we talk about diversity. Often a lot of companies that are online right now or that are members of the outdoor industry, they'll start looking at their board and they'll start looking at their leadership and they'll say, all right, we need to start diversifying right now. And so they'll create either a token position that is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or they'll hire on talent for their marketing or for their ad campaign. And I think that those are some of the things that drive that scarcity mindset, is when you begin to tokenize certain individuals within the field rather than uplifting the community as a whole. So diversity is more than just hiring one or two people. It's really truly including the community in your brand. So it's hiring more than one or two. It's creating more opportunities that really make the representation within your organization reflect the representation in your community, so that there isn't that kind of crabs in a bucket mentality or that grappling for power, but there's true equity. Again, diversity, equity, and inclusion. True equity comes from recognizing what the barriers were in the first place, removing those, and really creating opportunities for people to see themselves at all levels of the organization and truly included in all of the planning, all of the decision making throughout your organization.
Anyone else want to add before I go to the last question with 5 minutes left? So maybe we'll do sort of rapid fire, but this is, I think we're kind of building on the same. So I'm really glad we tackled all the issues at play here and some specifics, but I think in closing, maybe we'll go to the specifics here. And one of the questions that just came from Rochelle Lopez: do you have any advice or tips for young Black, Indigenous, people of color professionals who are entering this industry? So maybe as we go around to close, you can, something specific. What do you do now? What should I do tomorrow to start on this path? As well as dealing with the bigger issues at play. So Andrea, I'll start with you and then we'll go back around like we did the opening.
All right, well, my suggestion, and it would come out of the work that I do, is to develop a self-awareness about yourself and how you view things and how you see things, and really look into team awareness also, and like how you can relate to the other person. It's not going to be an easy thing. It's going to be really hard, but the more you can know about yourself and can bring up vulnerabilities in a positive way, speak your truth, lean into that discomfort and be willing to bring up something uncomfortable with somebody else. And I mean, it's going to go better if you can find a common ground with them, whatever that is. And I mean, it's not just automatically going to be fixed and perfect and fair. Like, you're going to have to push, unfortunately, to be seen and be heard. And yeah, I think self-awareness is the biggest thing that's going to bring that about. And then the next thing will be learning about the person that you're speaking to. Where are they coming from? You may have to do a lot more heavy lifting at this point. But if you can open that door and get an ally, then that is going to help you more, and another ally and another ally. And this, slowly and surely, is how I believe we can change things. So that's my advice.
Thank you. Andres, thank you.
All right, thank you, Andrea. So I think a good way to do it is when you're applying for a job, when you're looking at a position, adopt kind of the yes and mentality. Like, read through the qualities. Yes, I can learn these. Yes, I've studied these. And when in interviews, when in conversation, and this is what I add to you, your organization, to your mission, if you were to bring me on. So instead of simply saying, I fit the box that you've created, say, yeah, that box is something that anybody can understand, but only I bring this extra thing. And I think when organizations understand that it's not just checklist courses that get us hired, it's experiences that add to the mission, that's how we win. And kind of on the flip side, related to it, for folks who are figuring out how do we fix this within our organizations, a real quick thing you can do today in your next meeting is the next big decision or small decision that you make as staff, stop for a moment and say, why did we come to this decision? Look around the table and figure out who's not at this table from the communities that we're supposed to represent, and how did that lack of representation cause us to come to this conclusion. It's not an easy exercise. It's going to take a little while, but if you can literally do that the next meeting you have, I think that'll start to illuminate the need to be more representative in our organizations and have more inclusive cultures. So from both ends, when both those processes come together, I think we start to get at the power we have by being more inclusive.
Great. Les, and then Teresa gets the last word.
Absolutely. I'll say hi to Rachel. She's a member of the San Diego Thrive Outside community that posed the question. I would say the biggest thing, and kind of coming back to that word community, as a young BIPOC professional in this industry, finding your community and connecting with those that will uplift you in this work, I think is important. There will be, as Andres said, times where you'll have to pose difficult questions to leadership within your organization. There will be times where you'll feel excluded from what is considered mainstream outdoor activities or mainstream outdoor ways of being. And so finding community, finding those people that you can lean on for support in this work is so key. Teresa Baker has become like a big sister to me. I have to give her a shout out. just from between professional advice to now even personal advice. I won't mention what that is, but I'm just super appreciative for the way that Teresa really lifts up this field in general. Like, besides her professional work and what she's doing with the CEO pledge, she's actively working to lift up the DEI community. I think that's one of the things that's super important when we talk about inclusion in this work, is that we cannot get there alone. No matter what position you get to, you have to get there through community. You have to get there with community. And then when you get that door open, make sure that mentorship is a part of your next step, right? And you don't have to be, at the end of your career, looking back and then reflecting with old age wisdom and then mentoring. As soon as you get in, turn back around and look at, all right, who's the next person that's trying to get through that door? They're a part of your community. They're a part of your tribe too.
Teresa.
I will simply end by this. Don't start rumors. We owe it to one another to bring someone along with us. What good is it to get there and you're there alone? So make sure you're bringing someone along with you. And for young people of color who are trying to break into this industry, bug the hell out of marketing directors from outdoor brands, outdoor organizations, send them unsolicited emails, tag them on social media, because that's how we get the attention of people right now. Be respectful in how you do it, but make sure they notice you. That's the best advice I can give you, because that's how I've gotten the attention of a lot of people. So with that, I'll say, keep moving forward, be committed to your craft, and make sure those of us who have made progress, let us not forget how it was for us when we started out, and bring someone along with you, pay it forward.
Thanks for saying that. I definitely feel less alone after this hour amongst COVID and the racial tensions in our country and all that are going on. It's been a real pleasure and honor to be here with all of you. And I'll just close by saying there were some questions we didn't get to. I think we're going to try to get a copy and figure out a way to maybe answer those questions as a panel. So hopefully we get to those. But overall, thank you for joining us today. And everyone go forth and do great work at the rest of the virtual show. Thank you.